The leading Democratic candidates have largely broken with consensus-driven politics and embraced progressive ideas on health care, taxes, the environment and Middle East policy. Iowa City, the sharp left turn in the Democratic Party and the rise of progressive presidential candidates are unnerving moderate Democrats who increasingly fear that the party could fritter away its chances of beating President Trump in 2020 by careening over a liberal cliff. 2 months into the presidential campaign, the leading Democratic contenders have largely broken with consensus-driven politics and embraced leftist ideas on health care, taxes, the environment and Middle East policy that would fundamentally alter the economy, elements of foreign policy and ultimately remake American life. Led by Senator Bernie Sanders of Vermont, a Democratic socialist who is the top candidate in the race at this early stage, many vocal leaders in the party are choosing to draw lessons from liberal victories in 2018 rather than the party's breakthroughs in moderate suburban battlegrounds that delivered Democratic control of the House. These progressive Democrats risk playing into Mr. Trump's hands. He has repeatedly branded them socialists, yet they argue that their ambitious agenda can inspire a voter revolt in 2020 that elects a left-wing president. Those ideas that we talked about here in Iowa 4 years ago that seemed so radical at the time, remember that? Mr. Sanders, returning to Iowa this week for the first time as a 2020 candidate, crowed on Thursday. Shock of all shocks, those very same ideas are now supported not only by Democratic candidates for president but by Democratic candidates all across the board, from school board on up. The sprint toward populism amounts to a rejection of the incremental and often defensive brand of politics that has characterized the party's approach to highly charged issues for 40 years. Yet when nearly half of voters indicate in polls that they will not support the president's re-election, many moderates say the cautious strategy in 2018 that helped the party pick up 21 House seats that Mr. Trump carried 2 years earlier should be the playbook for next year. What we saw in the midterms is a lot of people from the center and moderate part of the party really win and take back the House, said Senator Maggie Hassan of New Hampshire, alluding to the careful and poll-tested campaigns many Democrats in Republican-leaning districts ran last year. We need to make sure we're being as pragmatic as we can. This moderate wing of the party lacks an obvious standard-bearer. Former Mayor Michael R. Bloomberg of New York, who would have run a centrist campaign, begged off this week. Senator Sherrod Brown of Ohio, a Midwestern progressive who favors a within-the-system style of pragmatic politics, also decided not to run. Senator Amy Klobuchar of Minnesota, who is running, has presented herself as a centrist but has not yet gained traction. Should former Vice President Joseph R. Biden Jr. enter the race, as his top advisors vow he soon will, he would have the best immediate shot at the moderate mantle. And if he does not run, Democrats like former Gov. Terry McAuliffe of Virginia or Gov. Andrew M. Cuomo of New York might try to seek that role. Mr. Biden's candidacy would immediately thrust a fundamental dispute to the center of the Democratic race. Do Americans simply pine for a pre-Trump equilibrium, less chaos and more consensus, or do the yawning disparities of these times call out for a more transformational administration? Mr. Sanders and other Democratic candidates, like Senator Elizabeth Warren of Massachusetts, are plainly wagering that voters want more than a return to normalcy. Ms. Warren proposed on Friday that the government break up big tech giants like Amazon and Facebook, the latest, and perhaps boldest, proposal to come from her campaign. And Mr. Sanders's platform, Medicare for All, free college tuition and an aggressive plan to combat climate change, has grown in popularity, according to polls. Speaking at the University of Iowa on Friday evening, Mr. Sanders took aim at establishment Democrats and won his loudest and most sustained applause by pledging to push through his universal health care bill. Mr. Sanders and Ms. Warren, along with a new generation of high-profile progressives like Representative Alexandria Ocasio-Cortez of New York, have emerged this winter as the clearest and most vocal arbiters of Democratic aspirations, if not the immediate congressional agenda. They are, at least, hastening the tectonic shifts taking place in the party. It was no accident that House Democrats modified a resolution targeting Representative Ilhan Omar of Minnesota for her controversial claim that pro-Israel advocates carry an allegiance to a foreign country. After Ms. Ocasio-Cortez, other lawmakers of color and the party's leading presidential hopefuls rebelled against singling out Ms. Omar. The episode marked a striking departure from the down-the-line support for Israel that has characterized the upper ranks of most Democratic primaries. Relying on wealthy donors has also been standard fare, and unremarkably so, in past White House races. But Mr. Sanders elevated the issue of campaign finance in his 2016 race, and his jeremiads against the billionaire class have all but made super PACs verboten in this race. He and Ms. Warren are refusing to hold high-dollar fundraisers. Representative Ayanna Pressley of Massachusetts, who won her seat after defeating an incumbent Democrat last year, conceded that the first months of 2019 had inflicted growing pains on Democrats, but she argued it was merely a necessary side effect in the party's evolution. After we build that muscle, we're going to flex it, Ms. Pressley said, yet Mr. Biden, in speeches at home and abroad, has used much of the first part of this year pledging to restore the dignity he believes that the country has lost in the Trump years, promising a restoration rather than a revolution. And, as his supporters put it less subtly, his campaign would represent something else. Overwhelmingly, the primary electorate of the Democratic Party wants to win. Senator Chris Coons of Delaware said. He argued that Mr. Biden could repair a lot of the ways in which our position in the world has been harmed, while offering a hopeful, optimistic, positive vision at home that would heal the divisions he said Mr. Trump has exacerbated. To such moderate Democrats, the most instructive recent election is not that of Mr. Trump in 2016 but rather the 2018 midterms, when many of the Democrats who won in battleground House districts and governor's races were decidedly less confrontational than Mr. Sanders.